Hello and welcome to Two Blokes in a Cave, a vaguely philosophical podcast hosted by me, Carlton Sin, Smells and Bells Catholic, and proponent of Just Wars, and Brendos, the producer in the cave, back again. Producer Brendos, thanks for being here.
Thanks. I jumped the gun a bit on that, but it is really good to be out of my producer cave and into this.
Well lit, magnificent.
It's much nicer.
Beast.
It's got a nicer table, some nicer mics. I could get used to this. Maybe.
Very good, very good. We're going to do a first thought, bringing it back. Brendos, this is an original first thought. What have you got for us, mate?
So I did just come up with this off the cuff, but as a fan of the show, I do really enjoy the first thought segments.
Oh, yeah.
I hope you guys think along with what you do as we discuss it. So the first thought we have this week is, if you had the power to halt the progression of weapon technology, where would you do it, if at all?
Like at what moment in history, if you could...
At what era of technology? It doesn't really have to be a year or anything.
Easy.
But at what kind of level of technology?
Okay.
Going all the way back to cavemen with clubs.
Yep.
And even looking a little bit into the future.
Oh, you go in the future?
Well, I mean, I did
Good man.
in preparation for this, I did have a look at some, not too much in the future. Like, they are legitimate weapon technology kind of mocks. So they are working.
Space lasers.
They are working on them.
But no doubt.
So
I saw a railgun. This is a side note, on a battleship, like a video, and that looked utterly terrifying.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've got this 100% correct or the science, but they were saying, I think what makes a railgun so terrifying is it can shoot its bullet or payload or whatever it is exactly across a massive distance extremely quickly.
Yes.
And that's the distinction, I think, between that and more conventional arms. But anyway, very, very terrifying looking railgun stuff. So I don't know. But yeah, anyway, for me, I would definitely halt weapon. I would halt the advancement of weapons quite a ways back, I think. And before I tell you what specific time I have in mind, I would like to talk a little bit about a couple sort of undergirding principles of warfare that existed in the past. In the sort of the pre-show meeting, we were having a discussion about siege warfare and the siege etiquette, and how an invading army would often... Sieges and warfare not actually as exciting as the movies would have you believe, on account of the fact that, we're all people. Not a lot of humans I know want to charge into, a moat and try and scale a wall to get up there and just get stabbed in the face by a dude on the wall. So
get hot oil poured on them as they do.
It's not as sexy. Like, combat is not as sexy as sort of the movies would dress it up to be. But the majority of sieges that happened were not violent affairs. They were mostly, we're going to camp out basically and stop you from getting resources. And without, another army coming to relieve the siege is the correct verbiage, I believe. Oftentimes eventually the city would yield because, it's you need food and fresh supplies to live. But the fighting element is actually quite sparse. And part of the reason for that is one of the ethics is, if you do fight, if you choose to fight back, if we were to win, we, I don't know if you have free reign to, but it's accepted that we will, slaughter, kill, rape, pillage without a lot of restraint. If you open the gates and let us in, there will be no killing. There'll be no, significant detriment besides kind of losing your political power. Yeah. But you could stay there, and that you've seen that throughout history from all sorts of cultures and religions from the Crusade times, with the sort of Muslim forces, the Christian forces. You've seen it. I'm not sure how much further east you go, but throughout sort of the Mediterranean classical world, is certainly European history is replete with examples. So that was quite interesting to me. I thought that this idea of there is also probably a more, and this might be more myth than anything else, but a more noble aspect to fighting when it's mano a mano. I'm not sure, and for those of you who don't know, I have served very briefly, and I don't like to use the word because it makes me sound like I did more than I did, but I was in the Army Reserves for about 2 years, so not a very long time, as it turns out.
You learned a bit.
I learned a little bit, and not as much honour in modern warfare, and mostly because there's such a great distance between you and the enemy at all times. Your idea is just to maintain a combat effective distance about 300 meters. The ADF, I don't know if that's a secret actually, maybe I shouldn't say that, but it's probably fine. But the combat
producer to cut it out if you like.
the combat range is about 300 meters, which is probably not a secret. Well, that's the range that they want to be. Anywhere up to about 600, anything past that, it's very difficult to hit a target accurately with any kind of consistency. So, and there's also, I guess, coming home from battle, I don't think the sort of glory is there for the men fighting. I think there's a lot more sort of PTSD probably than certainly the accounts you read in history, where you come home and people kind of cheer and welcome you, and you fought and you had this battle, and unlike again the movies, if we were fighting in a battle and you kind of look around and half your flank's gone, you're like, you know what, we're surrendering, we're running off to the hills. Not everybody dies. Like, it's very rare that everyone gets butchered. Once you kind of give ground and leave, that will push along and chase you down and capture people, but we're not running forever chasing you. Like, that's okay, they're gone now. The battle's over. Do you know what I mean?
At least you had that ability to run away.
You can't really run. I remember distinctly, and this is I think it's a very funny story. We were in, so I did an officer cadet, like an officer course, and we were doing a lot of academic kind of work, and one of the cadets with me asked a question as we were preparing, what do we do in these situations? And he said, what happens if an enemy gunship arrives and we didn't know it was going to be there? And the sergeant just said, well, you would die. And that's about it. There's nothing you can do. You have no recourse to fight against this. Basically, it's an angel of death. Will just appear. You won't even probably know it's there. You'll be mystified. That's what they call it when you get hit by a shell and your body just becomes a red mist. I did see a kangaroo get hit by a claymore at close range, and it kind of mystifies. It's a tremendous sort of scene. But I digress. The point I'm trying to make is it's hard to, and this is not to take away from the bravery and honor that our guys that do fight and serve experience, but I want to point out that there is a difference between sort of warfare in the past and modern warfare. And like I said, it's not to take away from anyone, but the emphasis is no longer on, mano a mano. You're going to go out there. There's it's not necessarily fighting to the death, because you're all in these lines, you're fighting, it's maybe the capacity to deal great damage is significantly less. And I think that's probably a good thing, because the capacity to kill mass amounts of people it's hard to conceptualize.
For sure.
Dang.
We did not fix that up.
No.
So when I was thinking about this first thought and kind of coming up with it, a scene from Saving Private Ryan really sticks with me. And
Is it the beach landing?
It is doomsday on the boats going to the beach. And there's a guy who is on the boat, and they're having a bit of a conversation. Everyone's very nervous but excited. Pardon?
Did she start vomiting? Is that the guy?
No.
No?
He gets shot in the head.
Oh, desertion?
It's just a no
Accident?
no
Can't remember.
from so they're about to
German.
yeah
Yeah.
so they're literally about to land on the beach.
Yeah.
It wasn't really a sniper. I think they were just shooting at them, right?
Yeah.
But they're that far away that the probability is slim, but they're still just going to take pot shots.
Yeah, of
And the
course.
guy gets unlucky enough to just get hit in the head before he's even set foot on
the beach?
on the sand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like when you think about the nobility of
It's hard to
going to war.
It's hard to say that that's a no. Like, and again, this is not saying that that person is not brave or courageous, anything like that. But the honor of war is kind of taken away from you if your death can happen so quickly without any real consequence of your own doing.
Yeah.
It's hard to get my head around. You ever played any of those like Call of Duty games that was set in World War II?
Yes.
Or Battlefield, where you had those missions where you would hit the beach?
Call of
Basically
Duty.
have PTSD playing that game. I'm like, this is so intense because you're gonna make it, but everyone on your boat just gets mowed down, and like
Yeah.
people are rocking up, the NPC types, and they're just getting destroyed. And I can't help but think in real life that is what's happening. Like people are just getting
Well, this
eviscerated.
this was World War II,
Yeah.
and that happened, and it just gets further and further apart from to what we consider that noble act of going to war.
Yeah.
So in the modern era, I mean, you spoke about 300 meters. I'm used to nautical miles on nautical miles.
Yeah.
And basically, if you can see your opponent at all, you've drastically
close.
messed up.
You're too
So
close.
you're relying on
Radar and
exactly
yeah,
radar, computers, technology to know where your opponent is, and you're completely removed from actually
it becomes
looking them in the face or looking in the
Yeah.
eye. It just becomes a
yeah.
I have a job to do. I'm going to carry out this. Thing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'll tell you what, I think one of the most interesting, if you read any books about World War One or watch any movies, you'll notice these parades, and they look almost like Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you've seen these in Germany, in France. There's just lines of people. I think in Australia too. There's just lines of civilians, and they're throwing flowers and they're cheering and clapping as the army marches down the middle and like boards the ships to go to war. Or obviously in Germany, gets on the train and they off to the front. But there's all these people, everyone, and they're cheering and they're so excited, they're elated because I think they're overwhelmed with this sense of like what you're doing is such a good thing. It's so noble and
Sacrificial for your country.
it's just such a beautiful thing. And then the horrors of that war, because I think that was the first conflict where both sides had the Gatling gun, but it was the first time where modern technology really came into play and significantly outpaced the military strategy to the point where it was just carnage. And then very quickly, people were looking around like, this is not it. Like I thought we were, I thought this was gonna be the Boer War. I didn't think that we're gonna just be in trenches for years, getting eaten by rats and just death everywhere. I mean, the Battle of the Somme, it's like 60,000 people died in a day. Like it's just you can't even comprehend that. That's an insane amount of people that just get mowed down. So I think for me, look, the exact time would probably be somewhere around the 3rd century. I think my boy Trajan was running the show in Rome, one of the 5 good emperors. Very peaceful time. You got the Legion. They're looking pretty gangster. You got the big shields. Seems like a cool time. I think the capacity to do... I think the reason for it, is I do think there is something noble about fighting for one's country or fighting for one's, empire, I guess.
In the previous episode, we spoke about just causes for war, and they're
I'm not sure they had a lot of just cause, but I'm with you.
no, but there are a couple. So this is a hypothetical for, okay, you do have a just cause for war, how would you like to see that played out? And I think if we establish like, okay, the cause is just,
Yep.
but what is the strategy? Like, do you really
Yep.
want to not even have a chance of seeing your opponent and just sending a missile off?
Well, look,
kilometers
I
away?
definitely think
Or do you want
these classical battles, these medieval battles, even these sort of post-Renaissance revolutionary period, they don't take place in the cities. Generally, they take place in fields, away from the cities, away from civilian populations. And whilst the conquests of Rome were specifically, to some degree, to capture people to sell into slavery, so it doesn't really count in terms of like where they fight, but they did fight armies that, and they did do things that weren't necessarily to catch. But I don't. What I'm trying to say is that they're a bad example because they definitely took a lot of humans for slaves, but still they didn't often, think of a battle, a famous one like the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. They're not going into like German villages to conduct warfare. They are marching along, and maybe I'm getting myself a little bit in hot water here, but they're marching along to a battlefield to kind of meet the German tribes in resistance. They just didn't realize that they had been outmaneuvered in the forest.
I would say, like, what you're saying is the
Excuse me.
the justice in war is morally good, but the cause for war being slavery and putting people in slavery, is not good. But that's okay to make that distinguishment.
Yeah, no, I think the distinction is there. I think the further back you go, I think it's harder to justify conflicts in my mind, but it's also easier to conduct a just war. It's harder to get going, but it's easier to, once you've started, it's easier to kind of follow the rules because your presence is felt. You have, the commanders in with the troops, keeping everybody in line. But now, again, in the old days, it's probably harder to go to war because, I see that land, I want that land. You kind of live there, but do you? Like, there's no well-established borders. Do you know what I mean? Like, why can't it be mine?
Yep.
You want it, I want it. Let's see who can keep it. But now, I mean, the modern world is pretty well established. Who's where and whose side of the river is, yours, and it's harder to really justify conflicts. But I think it's easy to justify conflicts now because you have clear, defined boundaries. But it's also harder to kind of keep a war just because you've got, any kind of bombing run has the potential to kill tens of thousands of people that didn't deserve to die.
So there is technologies that is making, like they're literally creating laser technology to the pinpoint accuracy, like the railgun type deal. But the way I look at it is, what's more accurate than a man swinging a sword? Like, if you want to talk about a justified target, that's as justified as you can get. Like, you're not going to accidentally drop it into a child.
Listen, you're not going to accidentally do it. That's a good point. I mean, you might.
You can accidentally. You
can definitely
put in the wrong coordinates and drop a bomb on a
Well, even
schoolhouse.
Listen, I think there's a stat out there that more bombs were dropped on Vietnam than all the bombs that were dropped in World War II collectively. And Vietnam is not a massive, massive country. It's not talking about Russia here. Like, they're bombing the living crap out of this country. People are dying that are not combatants. And that war is difficult because the guerrilla warfare that was present there, and
it's after World War II, so you think we'd learn from our mistakes and
you would think so.
Create the United Nations and we'll set up the Geneva Conventions, but we've already proven that it doesn't stick. and
Well,
people will
I've
break
got
the
a
rules.
sort of a first thought to build on to your first thought
Okay.
because sorry, I'll ask it in a second. I want to ask you my first question.
Can
Where
I
do
just,
you?
can I just wrap up on my
That's
my
what I was going to say.
first
Yeah,
thought?
finish on
So-
where you line up on this.
I'm gonna take a good guess and say you haven't seen June, the movie.
No, my
I
brother
didn't
wants me to
think that
watch
was
it
your
quite.
thing.
Well, Morgan wants me to watch it pretty badly,
So-
and I kind of do, but he keeps telling me it's like 5 hours long, and I'm like, I'm not sure I've got time to watch
I
it.
recommend it.
Okay, all right.
So it's a futuristic sci-fi where they've created this shield technology that any high velocity ballistic will be deflected by the shield. So you're immune
To bullets.
to bullets, anything high velocity. So it forces them to go back to knife fighting because with a knife you can slow down your movement
Right.
and stab that person
Why would it defend against the knife?
because it's slow. So
Yeah, but if you can,
I'm not
Okay,
I'm not
I'm
into
not
the
doing-
books,
yeah,
I'm not into the
yeah.
lore, but
interesting.
it is
Interesting. It's kind of like
fictional
Star Wars,
technology.
where like, why do you have a sword? It deflects bullets.
well, that's
Like,
it.
oh, okay.
Like I appreciated Dune because
Interesting.
it at least gave a reason.
Yeah,
as
no,
to why
that's
they're
okay.
not
I'm just,
fighting
I was
knife
curious as to like why wouldn't it deflect knives?
Yeah.
Because we go nice and slow.
fighting. Yeah, that's it.
Fair enough. Hey, look, like I said, I haven't seen the movie. I know
Yeah, I
the
know.
guy who wrote the books, or I've heard of the guy who wrote the books. I don't know him personally, but there was I think he's got some interesting political thoughts about like why his world happens and what's going on. So I'm familiar adjacent to the idea of June. But I haven't seen the movies or read the books.
I'm
so.
just drawn to that concept of in a war, like my ideal, and this is all theoretical, of course. Like we're never going to any short of this shield technology. We'll never go backwards. We always got to move forward, which is more separation, more removing from your.
But
actual
progress
opponent.
isn't necessarily linear, but I accept your premise that we're not going backwards.
I don't think we'll go backwards. But so I enjoy like the noble kind of aspect of hand-to-hand combat. I would go even earlier
Pretty
than
brutal.
you to remove the bow and arrow. Like
Remove the bow and a coward's weapon.
basically,
Yeah,
and it
get
comes
outta
back
here.
to the Saving Private Ryan thing, right? Like
You just get shot.
to
in the
just
head.
get shot and not even
Damn.
have a chance.
That would be.
So if you have a sword, we don't even have to go shields, but like if you're doing sword
If
fighting,
you're not naked with a stick, you're too far advanced. Eh?
the way that I have thought about it is every civilian, as long as they can pick up a stick or a chair, they have some kind of chance.
Man.
When you're just Gatling gun mowing down,
Yeah.
um,
There's some nursery rhymes about the Gatling gun.
okay.
Yeah, they're pretty gangster.
Can
Not
you
a few.
rattle one off the top of your head?
No. There's one I know. I'm not a very good singer.
Maybe
and
the producer can bring it up.
There is one about Great Britain talking about like warfare, and they're like, sucks to be you because we got the Gatling gun, you don't. Something like that. It's. We'll put it up on the screen. It's actually
we'll
quite
find
funny. It is a very It's funny, and I just imagine like young kids walking around like do Gatling gun. You don't have it. We'll smash you. Like
Yeah.
idiot. Should have had a Gatling gun. Yeah.
A tissue, we all fall down type stuff.
Yeah, there's a second stanza to that where they get back up.
Oh.
Yeah, I only know that because I have a small son and I have all these nursery books.
Is that like a modern era?
No, like they all fall down and then
It's on the bubonic plague, isn't it?
yeah, but like
How do you get
not,
back up?
not everyone dies.
Oh,
Sometimes you get sick and you recover.
oh interesting.
Yeah. So there's
was more of
like
a-
the Australian national anthem where they have the first stanza but no one knows the second stanza. One of the coolest things, and this is a super digression. So when I was in the army, the coolest thing I've ever experienced is every night before bed we'd sing the national anthem, but both stanzas, and we'd be in the like this hallway of the barracks, and it would echo like really loudly, and we were told to sing really loudly. And there's like 50 of us, not all of us officer recruit,
Getting
officer
a bit of
cadets.
harmonics going.
So cool. Like it'd give you chills because it was the moment where I felt like this is about as patriotic as I've ever felt before. And my granddad served in the military, and I feel a connection to doing, like I'm an old school guy. Like I want to, I want to serve the country, God, King, country. I'm into that kind of stuff. It's cool. Even if you think that's incongruent with what I said before about like not being super quick to react to stuff. I am into the like serving the country. But that was really cool. And like I didn't know the second stanza of the national anthem until I went to the army and we learned it. I'm like, this is actually pretty cool. Like it's very cool. And likewise with a lot of nursery rhymes and you've heard the quote, imitation is the highest form of flattery. The second half of that quote.
Nope.
So the quote goes, imitation is the highest form of flattery that mediocrity can pay to genius. It's not actually a very flattering thing to say to someone.
True.
Because you're essentially saying like you
That's the best you
are
can.
mediocre.
Yep.
Of course, like the best you can do is imitate me because I'm better than you. That's what it is, which is a very cool quote. But people just leave off the best part and they're like, imitation.
And it becomes a compliment.
Yeah, and you're like, that's not what it is. And I think, again, not to get on my high horse, but a lot of things, like we are saying things that aren't true or we don't understand the deeper meaning because we've kind of, not by any fault of any individual per se, but like, why wouldn't you tell everybody the second part of that quote? It's just one quote. It's one sentence. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah,
but
that's a cool.
It's a cool quote. So yeah, there's actually a lot of second stanzas to things that we have just forgotten, or we don't sing, or we don't talk about.
It's just getting worse with short form media. Everything's broken down into a 30-second clip to hold people's attention.
It's crazy. But yeah, I know that about because my son's got all these nursery rhyme books and I'm been singing and then as I'm saying that I'm trying to think of the second stanza but I can't remember, but they do get back up, I promise you that. Like I'll find it and take a photo of it for you.
So going back to before the bow and arrow, before the ability to take someone out from a distance.
Yep. So like a sling shot.
Yeah. Look. Around that time.
Okay.
I know there's been projectiles for a long
This guy's like,
time.
what if I just throw this spear? No more of that.
Like to me, there's two aspects of it. There's the chance for everybody to have a go in defending themselves. It's not just the person with the biggest stick, so to say. Like everyone's got a shot, which I like. You can't just mow down people who just don't have that technology. The other aspect, and I don't have any specific examples, it is in the beginning of Troy, but I'm sure this has happened sometime in our history where two armies would nominate their best warrior on behalf of their entire platoon or army.
Yep.
So and they would fight on behalf.
Yeah. Yep. I've heard of I'm confident that I have read somewhere where like a king has done something, like the leaders have fought. I don't know how often, but I would like to think that if you suggest, like if you suggest it, I think it'd be pretty awkward for the other team to be like, I don't really want to do that because I think it's kind of very cowardly. And then if you're think of like the human element to that. You're in line, you're about to have like a pretty brutal physical fight to the, potentially to the death. If you're on the front lines, probably to the death. And then this other person offers you a chance like, hey, no one needs to die here. Like, we're just doing this. How about you fight my man, Brendos, big guy. No one wants to fight him. And then the other king's like, nah, I'd rather send all these boys in to die. You're like, I'm not sure I really want to fight for this guy anymore. It's probably quite a psychologically damaging, or potentially psychologically damaging. Like, are you willing to sacrifice me? Really?
Yeah.
Can't you find like Dogsy back there?
So I would say, like, I don't really know how many times king versus king went hand to hand because, like, what I would say is the kings have a different role to play than being.
I'm pretty sure it was an English king. I'm pretty sure it was an English or French king. Pretty sure. I mean, they've fought each other for like 700 years. So.
But like what
maybe
I'm trying to say is like
that.
I think it's okay for the king to nominate their best warrior, and it's like it's his objective. He is the best. Everyone like rallies around him. It's like
It's cool.
the top tier athlete, if you will, the best at what they do,
Yep.
which is hand to hand combat, going against the best of
Yeah.
who they have. So that's like a nomination, and it's a sacrifice, and it's noble, like,
Yep.
in my opinion. And when I think about modern warfare, and we did do 3 episodes very recently on AI, so I don't want to like dwell on the AI thing, but
Check them out though.
in the near future to / right now, they are using AI technology in autonomous weapons.
Yeah,
and it's
scary
like,
stuff.
can you say that is noble in any way, shape, or form? Like even 0.01%. Like I would say no. Like the nobility is completely removed, and it's just who has the more resources, who has the more money, who has the
Technology,
smarter
yeah.
computer, is the victor.
Yeah,
That is the reality of our situation. It's just I don't.
I mean, to a
like
degree, we've always been a little bit of, throughout history, generally, the more technologically superior force wins. Generally, right?
Yeah.
I do think that, if we look at like a linear graph of technological advancements, we go from like, a gladius to a longsword to, like what's that cool? Can't remember the name of it. Yeah, it's a pike, but it's like not quite a spear, and it has like a sword on it. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's a cool kind of weapon. You know what I mean? Like as you evolve, and it's like a steady kind of trajectory, and then you kind of hit the modern warfare, and it just sort of exponentially takes off. You're like, this is quite disastrous. Like,
And it's possible happen
bad,
again.
very,
In
very
a
possible.
More exponential kind of nature, but
So, to circle back, do you have a rough time period? Would you say like 5 centuries BC? We're talking ancient Greece.
Ancient Greece.
Yeah, okay.
I know they still had arrows in that kind of era.
That's
but
what you think.
That's what I mean. There was always some kind of
They wouldn't
projectile,
have been
but
the greatest bow and arrows.
I mean,
back then, so,
we did speak about the Trojan horse being dirty,
not good,
but they also did
dirty,
some
rotten dogs.
noble kind of strategies,
Yep.
like employing their best warrior on behalf of the army, which I
Listen,
think is kind of cool.
The Greeks also one of the only cultures that I can see that wrote stories for Greek people from the perspective of the other side, which doesn't happen very often. I mean, even now when we try to do it, it's very cringe. Like it's not cool at all. It's like a sellout kind of crap. I don't like it. But this idea of diving into or telling a story from the perspective of the Trojans is actually pretty unique. It's not something that you would expect to find. Like if the English are kicking the crap out of the Irish, you're not going to have anyone in England writing about those poor Irish people. They're all like, yeah, baby, Pax Britannia, let's go,
Yeah.
kick your teeth in.
I'd say
That's
very rare.
That's the I would say the natural state of man even would be like, I'm with my boys. I don't care about you. You're on the other side of the fence. But the Greeks did have this.
That mentality helps you deal with the reality of the
Being
situation.
a bit
You're
of a
like
sneaky
taking their
dog.
life. So I
Well,
mean, you do have to
maybe
disassociate yourself in some level.
Sure. Well, certainly to some degree. I've got a sort of a first thought to build on. So we both kind of came down on this idea that we should probably limit the destruction and bring back the general honor that you would experience in more old school kind of classical combat. And a quick aside before we get to that, I wonder if that's why Star Wars is really popular, is because it kind of perfectly blends like the future and the past. Like you've got all these space weapons, and like the coolest people in Star Wars have swords and they can block bullets. And I think there's something innately ennobling about the sword. Do you know what I mean? I just think
Can
that
you imagine
specifically
a Star Wars movie when they're going, okay, Jedi, we're going to take down the Sith. All right, let's get in this box. Let's look at this screen and let's hit a couple of buttons. And they go,
fire off some nukes.
we did it, boys. We
Let's
destroyed the Sith. And like, that's not an entertaining movie.
Maybe not.
I think the sword aspect has a huge part of it. It's not the sole reason why.
I reckon
Star
I
Wars
have a
is good,
theory
but-
that the sole reason Star Wars is cool is because of this exact like. That's it. That sound is so cool. I just think that makes it.
Iconic.
Take that sound out, and what have you got? Nothing.
Yeah.
Anyway, my first thought to get you thinking, and anyone in the comments, love to hear what you have to say about this. Was dropping the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki a justified use of force? Why not?
It's
It's a toughie.
because I don't know the full
All right,
aspect
I'll
of
go
the
first.
situation. So
I changed my mind on this. So
it depends
I
on the
used to be-
circumstance. I believe the consequence was dire, right? If America did not drop the nukes, Japan was going to do some drastic measures.
They weren't going to surrender. I
No.
don't know what drastic measures. The fighting in the Pacific Theater was pretty brutal. Okinawa, a couple of the smaller islands on the way to mainland Japan was some of the most fierce fighting ever. Culturally, I think there was. I don't want to butcher any of this for the Japanese audience that listens, but there is this honorable side to warfare, wherein surrendering wasn't really accepted.
No,
There was the
you dishonor your family.
is it seppuku or something like that. You would. It was
Seppuku.
more favorable to kill yourself than to
Dishonor your family.
dishonor your family. In the West, the Germans at the point of defeat surrendered, and I don't think any of them surrendered with a cheerful heart. But the culture was not, we're fighting to the death here. Whereas in the Pacific, it was. It's the main argument I heard, and the reason why I used to be for the nuking, being probably a little bit young and maybe a little immature, was, are you really going to send 700,000, which I think is the estimate I've read, of your boys to storm the mainland Japan to die, or should we just drop a bomb? That's the justification. Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff you hear about, flexing on the Russians and trying to assert US dominance. And for the purpose of this thought experiment, let's try and isolate it down to American military strategy in taking Japan. Keeping in mind that Japan at this stage was not surrendering, had refused to surrender. In fact, after the first nuclear bomb was dropped, still refused to surrender. After the second nuclear bomb was dropped, the Minister of Defense of Japan said, we're not surrendering. And the emperor had to say, actually we are. We're tapping out. I'm
I think-
overruling you.
The Japanese culture was so can't think of the words, but intense.
Warrior spirit stuff.
So
I think I've heard that
the
phrase before.
ideology of the kamikaze, right? Like they, in their culture, cared more about their honor than their own lives, and that was proven time and time again, to the point that America knew they were not going to surrender. It's not in their nature. It's not in their culture. They will continually, perform kamikaze over surrendering or backing down. So it was a way, it had to be. I'm not saying that this is justified at all, by the way. I'm definitely
You're not a
leaning
bad
towards
person for thinking
not
it is,
justified at all, but I'm fleshing.
So
out
you're
the
on? Are
thought.
you on the no?
Yeah.
Yep.
But I feel like America thought that they had to do something so drastic to get them to change what's ingrained in their culture, as let's put aside the honor and do what's right for your people and keep them alive, because they were just going to keep sending them.
Yeah. Let's make it slightly more difficult, because I'm with you.
I've got one more point.
Yeah, go.
So the other, I totally lost it now.
Sorry.
All good, go. It might come back to me.
Okay. Imagine you are either the political leader or military leader of your country, and your objective is to win with the fewest casualties possible. And I think primarily your duty is to your own people. And if you have, let's just stick with this number, 700. I'm pretty confident that was the number. It was around that or 1 million. It was going to be pretty brutal fighting for the Americans if they hit boots on the ground.
But I came up with my my comment. Sorry,
Yeah, go.
One second. So the reason that the Americans wanted to drop it was because they had to prove that point, like have to do something so catastrophic to get them to stop the war. The other one was we have to do these things. I'm just speaking generally to learn a lesson. And we dropped the atomic bomb, but we haven't dropped a nuclear bomb. And I just feel like throughout history, people don't know the consequences
Talking
until
about
they...
thermonuclear bombs, the atomic bombs and nuclear bombs. Is there much of a distinction between those, or
I don't know.
I thought they were. I thought the distinction was. I thought the atomic bomb was a nuclear device, and then we have thermonuclear devices now that are a bit better.
I have no idea.
Okay.
But I can look that one up.
Does it? Yeah. The point is that they're pretty massive.
Let's say
weapons.
the second nuke. Like, and I mean, all I'm saying is they didn't know like throughout history, we don't know the consequences until we do. So even if you think, I don't want to go there actually, but nobody preempts very accurately how drastic like a consequence will be. Like, oh, my blanked it.
That's okay.
The the Russian
The revolution.
no, the nuclear fallout.
Oh, Chernobyl.
Chernobyl, yes. So it's like you'd think you would put further safety measures and you'd be more if you knew, but it's like they just didn't.
You just don't know.
So you fall into like you don't think it's going to be that bad. It's like we have to learn these lessons as a species by doing them. That's my point in a very long-winded way.
That's an interesting take. Am I hearing you correctly? And you're not saying that you justify this, but are you saying that the justification was to do something so profound that the Japanese had to change course?
So I don't personally think it justifies it, but I think that's what they did.
Okay, yeah, okay. Well, let me make it more difficult because that's just what we're here for. If you're the leader of a country, military, and you have the capacity to minimize the loss of life on your side and maximize the damage on their side, are you justified in doing that?
No.
No?
So like when we talk about like the just war theory and whether it's just, like you can do that and it'll be great for your side, but is it just? No. I'd probably bring the Zulu example into that.
Yep. That being that they massacred a bunch of Zulu.
Yeah, so they're on the English side, they had
minimal
that movie,
casualties. By the way,
they had maximum casualties on the other side.
That
That's
movie
not a
was
just thing
pretty.
to do.
I mean, that movie was pretty awesome because it didn't paint the Zulu as like weak or any kind of way like victims. They had a really impressive fight. They fought. They didn't all die, but they fought, and there was this sort of moment of respect at the end. I thought it was actually a really good movie, even though there was no real doubt as to who was going to win. It's a cool stand, and I think both sides had this sort of respect shown to them. I will kind of, I guess, end on this idea that I've been thinking of many times throughout history, and I'll use Vlad the Impaler as my example for this. And I think kind of what you're saying earlier, in that the Americans had to do something profound, played part of a role in this. But During his life, Vlad did some pretty horrific things, and occasionally, or at least as it's written, an entire village would be put to the spike and impaled. And depending on what sources you believe, and maybe a little bit of exaggeration, like lots and lots, like tens of thousands of people were put on spikes, kind of like the Capian Way in Rome with the crucified slaves in the Spartacus rebellion. Massive, right? Extremely gruesome, extremely brutal. In no way is that just. In no way. However,
love it.
However, like the next 10 villages, having seen the atrocities committed, were like, you know what? What's happening? 0 deaths. We surrender. Don't want to fight you. And then Vlad would be like, sweet, give me your tribute. We keep moving. Everybody's fine. It does seem... and again, I'm not a utilitarian, so I don't agree with this. Obviously, I'm just a boring Catholic at this stage. Predictably Catholic on the show. I shouldn't say boring because it's not boring. But from a utilitarian perspective, I think you could make a reasonable argument that, well, did we save more people? Save more people good? I think we're on.
Yep. I've as you were talking, I did have a kind of thought and a little throwback to one of our... I do not remember the episode, but one of the first thoughts where is it justified to go back in time and kill baby Hitler? And I am putting this on like the same kind of thought, because you're talking about the potential to save these 10 villages, and in Vlad the Impaler's case, he did. So there
it only works in retrospect. You can't play it out in real time.
Are you saying that you're going to kill a baby to prevent a potential World War II of a tyrant of baby Hitler? So it's the same. I think
it's a good point.
The same
it's
point.
a very, very good point.
I can't justify doing those gruesome, you're completely going against the laws of war and, what is just, these war crimes. You're doing things intentionally horrific. And if your reasoning is, hey, people are going to be scared of me, so they're going to live. Lives. I can't get
I don't know, bro. That seems rough. I tend to agree with you. I don't think it's justifiable to kill baby Hitler. To kill baby anybody, I don't think it's justifiable.
No, you're killing a baby. That's
not good.
That's the facts.
I think much like the Capian Way in Rome. And for those of you who don't know, quick summary: Spartacus rebellion, slave revolt, basically in the Roman Republic, and it's gruesome. It's horrible. A city in the ancient empire was called Capua, and it was probably 40 miles from Rome, and they crucified all the slaves that they captured from Rome to Capua on both sides. And there would have been tens of thousands of people nailed to crosses alive and just left there to be eaten by birds and die horrifically painful deaths. The problem is, and it worked in this case because, again, it's excessively brutal, but you do run the risk of uniting the next 10 villages to rebel against you because you're such a tyrant. You do run the risk of every slave being like, I would just rather die than live in this environment where at any notice I might be crucified. Better to live on my feet than die on my knees type of mantra. And I do like what you said about it's impossible to project ahead of time what will happen. And for the record, I'm not sure I fully buy the idea that excessive brutality at any level is in some way a mercy. Imagine anything being really tough to you because I want to save the next guy. I'm not sure I buy that. But I understand why some people may read some of the history and come to that conclusion because it worked in these specific instances. I'm not sure it's justifiable. But I did want to know if that worked. Dang it. If that worked, there we go. Because I think the nuclear bomb is kind of the modern the modern day equivalent of Capua. The Appian Way. Sorry, it's the Appian Way, not the Capuan Way. It's the Appian Way, and the impaling a village, putting a village to the sword. I think it's the modern equivalent of that. And again, for this example, I don't want to get too into the conspiracies about why they did it. I think there's plenty of real, practical, on the ground stuff that we can sort of zoom in on and go, this is what they were thinking. We're going to drop this bomb, and they're going to not want to fight anymore because it was so devastating.
Yeah.
But the trouble is it's very hard to know which way they're going to go. It could galvanize them even further and say, we're going to fight to the last man, or they could roll over. In the case of the Japanese, it took the emperor coming out and saying, we got to surrender, for them to finally go, oh, okay. And there's tales of those guys lost in the jungles of Vietnam that don't know the war's ended, and they're like found 50 years later, like surviving and trying to fight people, and
Still trying to fight
the enemy. Yeah, like it's pretty wild, and that, I mean, goes to this sort of warrior spirit we touched on earlier. But it's an incredible. I think it's incredibly interesting to try and dissect where is a show of force too much. And I think the just war theory is a good way of kind of trying to package that neatly. But certainly, I think we can look throughout history and see these examples of atrocities and go, like, is there a subtle secondary meaning to that?
I do see like the connection you're making. I wouldn't say it's exactly the same, because what Vlad's doing is horrific atrocities of impaling villages. A nuclear bomb just turns you're gone in an instant.
Well, not if you're, not in the blast radius. You might be stuck with a bunch of deformities.
Radiation.
That's not a pleasant way to die.
It's also, no, I'm not trying to say it's...
Look, I mean,
it's horrible. I wouldn't equate it completely.
Would you say that the numbers on the nuclear, not that the economic damage in any way measures, but what I'm trying to get at here is there's multiple layers of damage that are done with a nuclear bomb. Like, you've got the death, which is principal, right? The suffering of the surrounding areas that are maybe affected in some negative ways from the fallout. You've got the fact that there used to be a city there, and now it's glass, essentially.
And you probably...
It's radioactive, you can't go there.
Even if you threw all the money in it, you probably wouldn't create it, because the soil and the land's been destroyed.
Yeah. So I think, and I understand that it's not the cruelty or the visceral cruelty of someone being crucified or impaled on a spike is not quite there with like a nuclear blast. I do think the numbers of a nuclear blast and the fact that, like you said, you're just pushing a button.
So it is relative, like it is all
kind of gone.
Relative though, like when you compare the sword to the arrow, and then the arrow to the gun to the missile. But look, you're right. It's that exponential. It's not linear, and the nuclear bomb is.
I mean, it's pretty brutal.
Above. Yeah,
it's pretty brutal.
It goes against all of the laws of war. You can't not miss civilians with that. There's no selective targeting.
There's no way to justify, I think, dropping nuclear bombs on civilian populations. So
not at all.
So look, I'm interested.
Does that mean it's not justified to have one?
Yeah, that of course.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
The trouble with the nuclear bombs, and maybe what's kept us ironically safe or war free, largely, or like major global conflicts, is the proliferation of nuclear bombs, because they're so damaging. If they were to start going off, we could end it all. You know what I mean? And then there's a bit of I've read about some some fanatical people. Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, for example, was pretty fanatical, was willing to go basically to die. A lot of his generals in the north, not so much. Like once he died, they're like, yeah, we surrender. Sick of the bombing. Stop bombing Hanoi. Stop it. We surrender. Paris Peace Accords, 1973. So how many people are really willing to go and see the world burn? I'd say very, very few. And hopefully those people never get into a position where they can see out that kind of maniac idea. But
yeah, it's unjustified on multiple levels. You think about it, because it's not only destroying civilians and people and humans, it's destroying the earth. Like the technology is destroying the one place that we have in the universe to
so far
to live on so far.
Yeah, very cool.
Watch June.
Look, yeah, I think that is interesting. I'm a little bit more hesitant, I suppose, on the idea. Like, if you can do maximum damage and minimize your own casualties, it's probably worth exploring that idea if you are in a position of power, because I do think your first sort of duty is to your people. That being said, I don't agree with the nuclear bomb. I do think that was
Step too far.
Yeah, massively too far. And like I said, we won't in this episode anyway talk about any of the ulterior motives that might have also played a factor in that kind of stately game.
I think we could safe to say they're all unjustified.
I think we can say that what we've discovered in the cave today is that committing war crimes and atrocities not good.
Yep.
And I'm glad. Aligned perfectly. So that was a pretty good first thought, though.
Yeah, it was fun. It's fun to think about. It's
very interesting to think about.
War is a very depressing time. No matter what side you're on or where you are, it's always horrific. But
yeah, say war is hell.
I enjoyed going down these kind of thought patterns, and think it was it is beneficial to kind of think about these things. And I think I'll end it on once more. Even though we agree upon these rules, and we kind of deep down know they will always be broken, they always have been broken, and they always
still good
will.
To have them.
It's worth agreeing to them and coming together as a globe and
trying to establish some civility and decorum. I want to leave the audience with this quote about war that illustrates how bad it is, and I may butcher it slightly, but bear with me. War is worse than hell, and obviously I believe hell is pretty bad, because there are no innocent people in hell, and in war a lot of innocent people are destroyed. And I think that's for people of my persuasion, and last time I checked, there's quite a few of us, a couple billion in the world that believe hell's quite bad. War is worse. War is very, very bad. Obviously, not that anyone was probably pushing back on that point, but
maybe a couple.
Maybe some arms manufacturers, but
want to be dictators.
Yeah, there you go. This has been Two Blokes in a Cave, trying to get out of the cave. Until next time. See you later.
Yeah.